There is one time that she was morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I don't think I sent you a thank you. I know I didn't send you a thank you.
Oh, no,
I
to
know,
do it.
I know, I know. But yes,
I loved it. We had a nice
we
conversation.
had a great conversation. I had no idea exactly. You were you weren't prescriptive. You were just sort of just drawing us out.
Yeah.
And I have no idea, but I know where we're going. Oh, I know where I'm going anyway. And so.
And it's not crucial to know
I
exactly.
know, that's the whole point. I get it, but thank you.
No, it's a conversation.
It's a conversation. It's exactly what happens here. You don't know where you're going, but you bring it on,
A few signposts along the way.
and that is a moment of holiness. So
Listen to
thank
you.
you. Well, I'm practicing.
Good.
I've never sat up here and no. It
Why
says something.
don't you stand here?
No.
Get used to it. It's no big deal. You're going to be great. Good. And Monday, three-finger Mordecai Brown.
By the way, Rabbi Bob used to be sports editor of the Daily Connect.
Oh, really? So you know him?
Yes,
Is it classmate of yours?
yes.
Oh, that's very nice. He used to be the sports editor. How great is
Right.
that?
So you have that in common.
I was a sports editor at the high school.
Oh, okay.
Gristmill. Where'd you go to high school?
Shaker.
Shaker, so the Gristmill.
Yeah,
Yeah. Your class 60, don't tell me. Your class of 66.
no, 62.
62, I'm thinking college.
Yeah,
66 college.
yeah,
And then you went to Michigan?
right.
Yeah, and I got into Michigan law myself, but went to Chicago instead.
Okay.
Yeah, what the heck? It's worked out
Yeah,
for both of us.
I agree.
Isn't that true?
Yeah,
Good.
okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I'll look at that with interest.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. You enjoyed it. Lovely service. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Good morning, everybody.
Margie was interested to let people know about it.
Oh, so what is this?
So this is African Byzantine.
Do you want to say something about it?
I don't know if I'm the person to say, but where is it? There. I don't know how to get out.
Join the crowd.
Thank you. I will find it again here. So on Sunday and Wednesday,
Oh, and what's the
that's
African and Byzantium special tour? There's a tour at that time. Is she
right.
leading it?
One is given by John Cole, and one is given by her.
Do you want to say it? Okay, very good. That'd be great. Shabbat Shalom again. Nice to see everybody. So, let me thank those who participated in our bagels adventure. Thank you so much to Arthur Kane in sponsoring the bagels this morning in honor of Stuart Friedman's 80th birthday. I told him I've been there. It's not so bad. Very good. Happy birthday. And Arthur, thanks so very much. Many, many more wonderful birthdays. You're two-thirds of the way there, by the way. Right? 40, 40, and 40, 120. Okay, very good. By the way, this is just the year that Moses was called. Wasn't it? You know, he had lived his whole life, and at the age of 80, new adventure. Live stream, Joan and Bob Lustig in memory of George Morris. Thank you so much for sponsoring, and of course we will never forget George. I've got his picture on my refrigerator. And I'm trying not to go to it too often, the refrigerator. And thanks to Carol for picking up this morning. Not Carol. Who?
I picked him up.
Oh, thank you so much. Great, okay.
He got a little mixed up.
Oh, yeah, well, every time, we get it wrong too from time to time. So thanks very, very much for doing that.
You can thank Carol next week.
Okay, well, in advance, thank you for next week. I will be away next Saturday, but I'm pleased to tell you that Vivian and Malcolm Hennock will be leading Torah Study. So please come and participate in what I think was going to be an experiment. I was going to say a robust discussion. I'm sure it will be, but it's we're all experimenting all the time. So thanks so much for doing that, for volunteering to do it. Okay, well, welcome to live streamers. Very glad to have you with us as well. So let's continue with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments, enjoining upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Okay, so we are dealing with the next topic in our list of topics for this year. We're looking at the land of Israel and its various features in the Bible. And I think we've begun to see this is one of the Bible's pervasive themes. I mean, it's everywhere through the Tanakh. And so last week I began by reading a passage from W.D. Davies' The Territorial Dimension in Judaism. And the passage begins, is there an essential territorial dimension in Judaism? And I think we can safely say that in terms of the Tanakh, in terms of the Bible, the answer is emphatically yes. Think about the history of the prehistory, I might say, of Judaism. That is, biblical religion, the religion of the ancient Hebrews and then the Israelites. We don't really have Judaism named in the Bible until after the exile. Because as you may remember, of the 12 tribes, only the tribe of Judah survives the exile. So just to lay the foundations for that idea, the 12 tribes are divided into two unequal groups with the division of the kingdom after Solomon. You remember, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Israel in the north, Judah in the south, 10 tribes in the north, 2 tribes in the south. When the Assyrians defeat the northern kingdom in 722 before the Common Era, we have the Assyrians playing out their view of how to deal with defeated peoples. And their view is, disperse them so that there's no longer national integrity, which can lead to an uprising or an attempt to return. And therefore, since the people are dispersed, we have the foundations for the 10 lost tribes. They disappear from history. Some of them clearly come back at some point, but we just don't know what happened to them. Now, after 722, we only have 2 tribes, because we only have one of the 2 divisions, territorial divisions, Judah in the south. Judah is defeated by the Babylonians in essentially 586, and they go into Babylonia. But by that time, Judah has absorbed Benjamin. So now we really only have 1 tribe left, and that's Judah. And the Babylonian theory of how to deal with defeated peoples is to take them out of their land, but allow them to continue as a national, or I might say cultural entity. And therefore, Judah remains self-identified for the period of the exile. So, I mean, here is a kind of daring claim, but I think it's true. The Babylonians saved the Jews. If the Babylonians had had the same theory as the Assyrians, the tribe of Judah, the individuals in the tribe of Judah, would have been dispersed around the empire and disappeared. And that would have been the end. So the Assyrian view was dangerous for the continuation of a people. But the Babylonian view was the foundation for the possibility of the future. And so when the King Cyrus of Persia, the Persians defeated the Babylonians in 540, the Persians had yet a third theory of how to deal with defeated peoples, to allow them to return to their ancestral land as long as they pledge subordination to the empire. In other words, a people back in its own land will have 2 things to try to preserve: peoplehood and territorial integrity. So the Persian view allowed the people not only to continue to exist, but to exist as a separate people, as a people itself, and not just a part of a larger territorial entity of the empire. And of course, going back meant for the Persians that they now had a loyal group. Thank you very much for letting us go back. What can we do for you? Or to put it differently, we know you're letting us go back not just for our reasons, but for yours. What are your reasons? And the Persian reasons are that we have a loyal people who might help us to defend the outer limits of our empire against invasion by the Egyptians. So they now have a kind of wall on their western boundary, and that wall is a loyal people to the empire. But who comes back? Judah. So of the 12 tribes, only 1 is left. The tribe of Yehudah. And the people of Yehudah are the Yehudim, Jews. And so the tribe of Judah, now transformed, become the ancestors, I might say, of the Jews. Not a new people, but a newly named people. So when Davy said, is there an essential territorial dimension to Judaism, we know that the affirmative answer is grounded in the relationship of the surviving tribe, its name, to the origins of the name Judaism. Okay? So Judaism really emerges as a definitive, described entity as Jews only very late in the history of the Bible. That's what this circuitous description leads to. So what do we have before? We have Hebrews. In the book of Genesis, the Jews, I'm now using Jews in quotes, are the Hebrews. In the book of Exodus, they are B'nai Yisrael, the children, the sons of Israel. Just think of that first word of that phrase, B'nai Yisrael. B'nai is the plural genitive, sons of, banim, sons, B'nai, sons of. Or we could, as it's often translated, the children of Israel. That's a woodenly literal translation. Think of another use of that word, b'nai, or banim, or singular, ben, son. The Aramaic for son is bar mitzvah, which now we should translate son of, or bat, daughter of a commandment. What the heck can that mean? You are now the son of a commandment. I thought I was the son of my parents. What does that mean, son of commandment? The word ben, which means son, is often used as what we call an adjective of relation. So when Joseph's age is named in Genesis 37, Ben Shva Esrei Shana, the son of 17 years, which means he's 17 years old. And Ben being the adjective of relation. He is related to 17 as the years of his life. Okay? So B'nai Yisrael can be understood as children of Israel, but its real meaning, translation, is Israelites. People related to Israel. B'nai, adjective of relation. So we have Hebrews in Genesis, we have Israelites from Exodus on, and Jews only at the end of the Bible. So it's the history of those names of the same entity, the Jewish people in their early stages, given different names in stage after stage. Okay, so when Davy says, is there an essential territory dimension to Judaism? And the answer is yes, and it begins vastly in the Bible. We know that Judaism does start in the Bible, but not yet named as Judaism until the very end. Get the point I was driving at? Okay. So we can illustrate this very easily by looking at the very first chapter in which we are introduced to a Jewish person. And now by Jewish person, I mean, depending on where we are in the Bible, either a Hebrew or an Israelite or a Jew. And the first chapter that introduces the history of a particular people is Genesis chapter 12. And Genesis chapter 12 opens up, go to the land that I will show you. So the very first part of God's command to the very first Jew is related to the land. And Abraham goes immediately. And before that chapter is over, or I might say verse 7, the Lord appeared to Avram, he's still Avram, and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. So immediately, land is promised not just to Abraham, but to Abraham's descendants. So that's extremely powerful. At the very beginning of the story, the featured idea is land. There are other featured ideas. God calls Abraham. There's a relationship between now God and Abraham. It begins with a command. Abraham follows the command. So the very idea of commandment in its twofold definition, command and following the command, which is the logic of covenant, I'm going to do for you, you're going to do for me. It's not yet called that kind of covenant, but there it is in a very nascent early form. And Abraham says yes, modeling compliance with a divine command. I mean, Abraham is the first Israelite, the first Jew. But no, you've heard me say this over and over again over the years. Not just chronologically, but in terms of the kind of adherence, the kind of values that are already embedded in that first conversation. A relationship to God, a relationship that is bilateral. I'm telling you, I want you to tell me back. Related to an adventure, a journey. The first thing God tells Abraham is, embark on a journey. Embark on an adventure. Judaism as an adventure. Right? And Abraham says yes, and he goes. And he goes into the unknown. He doesn't know what's coming, except that he's been called by the God he believes, or he's willing to follow, to go off to a place, the nature of which he doesn't yet know, but he goes anyway. Okay, so he's willing to take a chance. And when he gets there, the first thing he does is he builds an altar. Verse 7. The Lord appeared to Avram and said, I will assign this land to your offspring. And he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Okay? So he engages in a ritual act of relationship, building an altar to the God who had called him. And it's a kind of sacrifice, which has been his life so far in chapter 12. He has sacrificed the well-being of predictability for the adventure, which is filled with something unpredictable. And along the way, God says, thank you for going. By the way, the land that you have arrived at is a promise. It's not just a place, it's a promise. Not just for you, but for your offspring. Who are the offspring? Let me tell you concretely who some of them are. Us. In other words, we are part of the promise of this land. So when Davies asks, is there an essential territorial dimension to Judaism, we can see that the answer is a very rich and emphatic yes. Beginning in the Bible, and beginning at the very beginning of the history of our people. Isn't it? It's quite astonishing, isn't it? All that Abraham, let me say it this way, all that the Abrahamic activity means to what the Bible understands to be some of the definition of what it means to be this people. So I think it's really quite astonishing. When we say Abraham is the first, we know that the answer yes is not just chronological, not just first in time. You know, when Euclid set out to develop his geometry, the axioms are first. You don't develop a system without axioms, without presuppositions. They're first in time in the development of the system, but they're first in meaning in the sense that they lay the foundations for all that follows. If the axioms are rich, the system can be rich. If they're poor, the system can't be very rich and continue to expand down through time. I thought I saw your hand, Russell. Long time ago. Okay, very good. So what we are exploring with this, I've always found quite exciting. Though I myself am really not a Zionist in the sense that I yearn to go to the land of Israel to live there. I'm really myself a diaspora Jew who recognizes the power and possibility of Jews in the diaspora. But I certainly see and value the importance of the land of Israel to our people, and especially those who want to go and live there. You know, I've been there, I have friends there, but somebody said to me, are you yearning to pack your bags and move there? I would say no. But I'm very fascinated by the role of this entity in our history. And it pervades the Bible from beginning to end. Abraham at the beginning, the very last line of the last book of the Bible, the book of 2nd Chronicles, is when King Cyrus says, all who would like to return to the land of Israel, do it. And the last line says something like, and they went up. Vaya'al, which means to go up. And we have two uses of that term in Judaism, don't we? Aliyah, which has two different uses. To have an aliyah, to come and say blessings before the Torah reading, which means, for example, in our sanctuary here, to climb the stairs, to go up literally, but also a spiritual going up. You're going up in order to relate intimately with the Torah. And the same use of aliyah in terms of going to Israel. I mean, if you land in Jaffa or Tel Aviv and you want to go to Jerusalem, we'll talk about Jerusalem, you're going up. It's an ascent physically, but it's also a spiritual ascent. So when King Cyrus says you can return, and the Torah ends with the word vaya'al, and they went up, the Torah, or the Tanakh at this point, is not just saying they went back, but they returned to a spiritually singular place, and that is the land of Israel, and especially Jerusalem. We'll talk about the relationship between the land of Israel and Jerusalem in just a minute. So literally, from beginning to end of the adventure of the Israelites, we have featured front and center the land of Israel. And we'll see, and we've begun to see, all the ways in which that is true throughout the Bible. So there are lots of themes. We've been looking at lots of themes in the Bible, but this is one of the richest and most diverse and pervasive ideas in the entire Bible. And after 2,000 years of exile, the Jews, at the earliest opportunity to do so, began modern Zionism. The times had to be right, but what ignited Zionism was a 2,000 plus year memory of the land of Israel. And memory can be used in two ways, can't it? Interest in the past for its own sake. We call that nostalgia. Love to go back there. Wouldn't it be great to go back there? And nostalgia comes from the word, the pain of return, the pain of yearning. Emily Dickinson says that nostalgia is the rust of memory, which means it's only one part of what memory can mean. Because in the Bible, every time we have the imperative remember, it's accompanied by a call to action, which is not about the past. It's about the present and the future. So memory can be nostalgia. I'd love to go back there. Wasn't it great back then? Wasn't it great to be a sixth grader? No. I mean, yes and no, right? And nostalgia, though we all engage in it, is not an active force in living today and tomorrow. But if memory is a foundation for the future, memory points to the future, then memory is an ever-active force. And that's how the memory of the land of Israel has served the Jewish people, always thinking about return, remembering the past and its richness, because I'd like to do it again. Not that I'd like to go back there, but I'd like to do it again. So memory is an engine for action in the future. And that's what the land of Israel has been for the Jewish people. I mean, it is astonishing, isn't it? After 2,000 years, at the first opportunity, the Jews went back. We are going back to the land that's been on our mind for 2,000 years, ready to go. And I think if we all look at our grandparents, especially our great-grandparents, who may have migrated from some place in Western or Eastern Europe, I doubt if we are driven by the hope that we're going to go back to Bulgaria. And the Jews ever always wanted to go back. Not every one of them, because we did settle in the diaspora, and though there was tragedy in diaspora life, there was also great flourishing. And the very fact that we survived it means that it was a means of survival, although it was also a means of threat. So there is something quite remarkable about the role of the land of Israel in its many manifestations, both in biblical literature, but in the life of the Jewish people for 20 centuries. It's pretty astonishing, I think. So, what have we looked at so far? Aside from chapter 12, we've looked at different ways in which the land of Israel features in the Bible. We looked at the land as a haven. From the book of Joshua, for example, I will give you rest in the land round about. So the implication is that life has been tumultuous, and we know that it was during the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And finally, arrival at the land is seen as the end of the tumult and the possibility of rest. Okay, so that's land as haven. We also looked as land as homeland, where a full natural life can be read. And we looked at Deuteronomy chapter 26, part of which we read at Pesach, where the people are engaged in farming, in pilgrimage, in establishing institutions, in worship, in helping one another. The components of a way of daily life in that land. Okay, so, or as we might call it, normalization. The 40 years of wandering the wilderness, let alone the 400 years of Babylon, of Egyptian exile, were not normal life in the sense of living our lives by our own values and aspirations. It's only when they arrive at the land of Israel that they can live fully their own lives in their own ways, and therefore normalize their life. Okay? So haven as refuge and homeland as normalization. And now we want to look a bit at the land as holy. And just to put this idea on the table, if you think of modern Zionism and its various manifestations, different kinds of Zionism, so land as haven is the featured hope for political Zionism, Herzl Zionism, Theodore Herzl Zionism. I want to find a refuge for a beleaguered, ever-imperiled people. And that's why he was willing to accept the offer of Uganda, because the house of Judaism was on fire in Eastern Europe. And when the house is on fire, you don't ask, what kind of life do you want to live? You get the people out of the house, and you get them into safety. And Herzl was willing in that emergency to take any place because haven was the objective of political Zionism, at least in its earliest manifestations. One of the reasons why Mizrahi, I think I'm right about that, I may be wrong, was willing to make a peace with Zionism as a political, secular endeavor, because they too recognized that even though the land was primarily holy and an instrument for holy living, religious Zionism, they recognized that, yes, the house is on fire, and we can't wait. So we're willing to make some concessions to political Zionism for that. So land as haven in the Bible is one of the precedents for the possibility of political Zionism. Land as homeland is a precedent for Ben-Gurion's, is it mamlachtiyut, is it statehood, that we can have our own state, our own government, and wouldn't it be great if we could have prostitutes walking the street of Tel Aviv, not because we're in favor of prostitution, because it's a sign that the people has become normal, in the sense that all the ways of living, favored or unfavored, good or bad, now show that we have normalized our life as a people at home. So the biblical idea of homeland is a precedent for another form of Zionism. Now that we get to the land as holy, this is the foundation for religious Zionism. The land is the place, maybe the only place, where a religious people can find its own creativity and its own way of it relating to God. So the various ways in which the land of Israel is featured in the Bible can be seen as ancient premises for different kinds of Zionism. There is another form of Zionism which I want to look at a little bit later, maybe not this morning, we may not get there this morning, which we might call agrarian Zionism. The return to the land, not in the sense of returning to a place which just happens to be a land, but actually thinking of the land itself as a sacred entity. And being on the land is a way of being devoted to our deepest values. And a Zionist theoretician, Aleph Dalet Gordon, Aaron David Gordon, actually represents what I like to call a mysticism of the soil. Mysticism is about creating intimacy between people and some religious entity, God. Okay? So when you think of regular mysticism, it features the attempt to have dveikut, clingingness, between people and God, through prayer, through mitzvot. This might be mysticism from above, right? The vector is up to transcendence. Gordon's mysticism is a mysticism from below. He's a secular Jew. He's not interested in a relationship with God, but he's interested in the structure of that relationship. I with something holy. But for him, the holy entity is not up there. It's down here. It's the soil. And it's our soil. How do I know that? That's where Abraham went. That's where our people live. That's where our people yearn to come back. So no good Zionist can hope to go somewhere, either to get a refuge, Herzl, or normalization, Ben-Gurion. We have to go back to the land of Israel, because that land itself is inherently holy, and especially holy to us. Which means, what is the central activity for Gordon that the Zionists must engage in? Farming. And now you have that kind of Zionism, which is not preeminently interested in haven or homeland, but reconnecting with the soil. How do we do that? We get the soil under our fingernails. You can create all the high culture you want. It won't be ours until it emerges from a primary relationship to the soil, because that land is particular, and it's particular to us, And if we want to create a new culture, you have to start with farming. You have to start by engaging in what Gordon derisively says we have never featured in our aspirations. Labor with our hands. We are Luftmenschen, right? But we're people of the air. It doesn't matter where we are. We can read Goethe anywhere. We can read Maimonides anywhere. But we can't be Jews anywhere, according to Gordon, because we have an unbreakable connection to that land. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? So when we think of the Bible's understanding of the land as holy, we see this as a precedent for yet another kind of Zionism. So really our study has two forms to it. Exploring what the land of Israel means in the Bible. I mean, after all, we're doing Torah study. But also as laying the foundations for all the kinds of Zionism that flourished in the late decades of the 19th and the early decades of the 20th century. Why did Zionism take so many forms? Now we know the answer to it. I mean, not only were there particular needs, but there were particular precedents that are ready to be reignited in the active life of the people after 2,000 years of not being able to do it. Stuart.
Isn't that the problem of Zionism today? That you have different groups in Israel all saying ours is the true way of finding God.
An exclusivist claim to the land.
Yeah.
We're going back to the land that means something to us that it can't mean to others. And therefore, we are the true inhabitants of that land.
Yeah.
And if anybody else makes a claim for it, that claim is bogus. Because the land is ours and exclusively ours, not just because we said so, but because God said so. And history said so. We've been yearning to go back. And the first opportunity, we went back. We said it meant something to us. And when we had the opportunity to go back there, we showed that it did mean something to us. So I think Stuart's making a very good point. Exclusivist claims fly in the face of claims made by others, which to them have as much power as our claims mean to us. I mean, the fact that Muhammad did his night journey to heaven from the Temple Mount means that the Muslims also have. That doesn't mean as much as what ours means to us. No, come on. But to them, it means as much as ours means to us. So we often talk about the land of Israel as the twice or thrice promised land. Different peoples, different religions say, no, God said to us, and so on. So yeah, you're really right. The stronger our claim, I might say it this way, is, the more absolutist it seems to become, and in modern times and circumstances, exclusivist claims, we can try it as long as we want to. It's probably not, we're seeing it right now. The choice now, I'm going to be political for a moment, is to try to find a way to a two-state solution or to have a forever war with the Palestinians. So it's not just largesse that may lead us to want to form a Palestinian state. It's just this, okay, we see your claim. We're going to help you. No, it's in our best interest, so the argument goes, to try to end this forever war, and then the vehicle is to help the Palestinians realize their aspirations the way we did a century ago. I mean, in a way, one could say, I say this, the Palestinians are the Zionists of the 21st century. They have claims similar to our claims. So it's true. I think that's a very, very good point. And what we might need to do, if we're grounding the Jewish claim to the land on the Bible, we might want to look for universalist tendencies in the Bible. After all, claims of a particular land by a particular people, we might call particularism, right? Laying the foundations for the aspirations of a particular people. Is there an equal but different assertion that the claims of all peoples have status and rights? And I think we could, let me quickly find a passage. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 19. One of the great passages in the Bible. I just didn't pull that out of my head because it's part of what we're going to do here, though it's one of my favorite passages.
654.
654, and let's go to verse 23. Verse 23. So Isaiah here is talking about the future, okay? Bayom hahu, in that day, which is a kind of eschatological assertion. We're thinking about the future where something climactic will happen. Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad. In that day the Lord shall be one, and his name shall be one. I think from Zechariah, which we say in the service at the end of the Elena. So look at verse 23. In that day, there shall be a highway from Egypt to Assyria, that is, the lands that border the land of Israel in those days. The Assyrians shall join with the Egyptians, and the Egyptians with the Assyrians, and then the Egyptians together with the Assyrians shall serve the Lord. Okay? In that day, Israel shall be a third partner with Egypt and Assyria as a blessing on earth. For the Lord of hosts will bless them, saying, Blessed be my people Egypt, my handiwork Assyria, and my very own Israel. That represents God's aspiration as being able to call all three peoples his people in different formulations. That's just an assertion, isn't it, that in God's mind, according to the Bible, there is an equality of status among three nations, two of whom are represented as the enemies of Israel in various places throughout the Bible. And there will come a time, by Yom HaHu, in that day, when those enmities will dissolve and all will be in covenant, we might say, with God. So, to Stuart's, I think, very important point here, the Bible would like to say that, at least in some places, there's an ideal of the needs of all, or at least some other peoples, to realize their aspirations as well. So I think the Bible can also support a universalist tendency and not just a nationalist one. Jim?
But don't we truly have a unique situation here, because most territories are achieved and held by military strength. And after the 40 years wandering, God told Joshua, take the land by military strength.
Right.
But now, in current days, even since when Israel became a state, we're constantly politically trying to own the land. And that historically doesn't work. The only way to hold a piece of land is might is right. And so, the criticisms going on now fly in the face of reality. Everything we're reading here says, don't worry about it, you don't need an army, God's going to make this happen. The only trouble is, that's not happening, at least not in our time. So back to my original point, we've got a unique situation in terms of we own this land. everybody else that says we own the land has an army that says so.
Good. Well, look, I mean, we fought a Mexican war because we wanted to hold on to or expand our territory in the Southwest. I mean, I don't think we need an army today to characterize our relationship with Mexico. That is, yes, we're not going to abandon the army, but we may find other means of creating a relationship with border nations that don't require the imminent use of armies. Of course, a standing army is important, but it may be that borders can be pacified so that armies aren't necessary in the predictable, in the near future.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying, that take the border of Mexico, United States. That's not a theological difference.
Okay.
This is a unique situation. That's what I'm pointing to.
Well, it's a unique situation unless we embrace something of the theory of American democracy, let us say, which goes back to European foundations, the separation of church and state. I mean, the recognition that theological claims can be exclusivist, and therefore, in a pluralistic society, you can't allow the church to have direct impact or influence on the state. Separation of church and state. Now, a theocracy, which is what religious Jews over there would like, is a threat to the possibility in democratic Israel of the incursion, the invasion of the state's prerogatives by the synagogue. And that, I mean, I think you put your finger on another problem, that if the religious Jews over there gain control in some serious systemic way, this will make peace with neighbors or acknowledging their claims harder. And that's the value of secularism as a political idea. Not necessarily that there shouldn't be religion, but religion is dangerous to the modern state. And Israel is a democracy in some very powerful ways, but always threatened by the religious establishment. So I think you put your finger on it. I mean, an answer to Stuart's important point is a recognition of plural interests which need to be satisfied, not just ours, if we could pull that off. Another problem is the role of religion in state matters. And the theory of democracy recognizes that threat and tries very much to contain the role of religion. And there's a difference between religion and state on the one hand and religion and society in another. Religion can play a very important role in society, in the marketplace, in communities. But it can't play an important role in the state because it tends to be exclusivist. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, those are threats, but we can see ways around them if we can pull it off. Ellen?
When we entered the land of Israel, God told us to basically wipe out everybody else.
Yeah.
And we didn't do it.
Yeah.
So therefore, we felt even at that time that the land needed to be shared.
Shared. Right. Yeah. It just depends on in what way we didn't do it. We didn't do it because we came to believe that it was wrong to do it, or no, we didn't come to believe it was wrong to do it. We just couldn't pull it off.
I think it's the form.
You think it's the former. I tried to make that claim many years ago by finding a counter narrative in the book of Joshua. You remember how that went for me? Because we took one of our famous votes, we looked carefully at the book of Joshua, and it turns out the question was, how many agree that there is a counter and an important counter narrative in the book of Joshua? How many agree? And it turned out that only one person continued to believe that, and that was me. Nobody else, after months of exploring the book of Joshua, nobody else was convinced by my argument. And that's when I thought maybe I should have gone to law school. But that's the point you're trying to make, that really there is a counter narrative in that book, accompanying or opposing that we must destroy or exile everybody else. And I think the potential power of my idea, which still burns in my soul, is that there is a kind of author in that book represented by resisting the idea that the land is only ours and there can't be others. Yeah, right. Malcolm, nice try, Ellen. I tried it too once.
What could you speculate as God's motive for making this grant to Abraham?
Yeah. So what was God's motive in making this land Abraham's and his descendants, or what was his motive for making it exclusively Abraham's? Both, yeah. I mean, I can see a rationale for making it Abraham's. A people needs a land. One could say that peoplehood thrives with some sort of territorial integrity. That it's better when we're living together than we're not living together if we want to maintain the coherence of ourselves as a people. So I can see what you've made is a weak claim and a strong claim. The weak claim is, what's God's motivation for giving Abraham a land? And it's weak because it's very easy to make that, to show that that claim has validity. If the claim is, this is our land and ours only, is that claim made in the Bible? Yeah, so that's a good question. You see the place where it is?
In the book of Judges,
Yes.
Samson
Yes.
goes to bed with a woman of Gath,
Okay.
and she's a Canaanite.
Yes. And what happens?
She cuts off his hair, or she has people cut off his hair.
Oh, that's interesting. So the inference I sense you're making is to have other peoples live among us is dangerous to us.
Yeah. But, I think, the Bible tells us throughout, historically,
Yes.
that
It's dangerous to have people living with us.
no,
Yeah.
exactly the opposite.
The opposite. Oh. You're making now a different point.
Yes,
The point about the woman of God is people living with us are dangerous. Now you're trying to make the point that throughout history, people have lived with us in some peace.
yeah,
What about that? That it's hard to show evidence, definitive evidence, for this land is ours alone. I don't know. I just don't know. I think I'm gonna say.
I'm working on next week here.
Very good, very good.
Full disclosure, but, for a second, and you've touched on this already, the next week's parasha is Kedoshim. And Kedoshim means holiness, and we'll explore what holiness is.
Yes,
But part of, and I think you've already addressed this, and it doesn't deal with the exclusive versus non-exclusive
right,
nature, but you've already described how holiness can be connected to the land.
right,
Exclusive or non-exclusive.
Right,
But
exactly.
to me, part of God's motive is, God understands that we as humans, we live in this physical world. And there is I own a house, I own a piece of property that offers me security. I can grow vegetables, I can raise lambs and cows. And so there is some sense of that biblically and in modernity, that for we humans, land has some essential import to
Sure.
our lives.
sure. But that doesn't mean I can't live with my neighbors.
I'm not answering Stuart's question.
Yeah, no, look, let's do this. Let's keep that question in our minds as we're looking at the role of the land of Israel. Are there exclusivist claims along with the fact that a people needs a land, and it needs a land, this has been part of the point here, for a variety of reasons, refuge, home, security, cultural life, and so on. But is there a claim that a people needs a land on which nobody else lives but us, which is an extremely strong claim? So I'm going to think about it. Are there passages? I mean, Ellen's point about the book of Joshua would seem to be close to that claim, just in the sense that if you're making an exclusive claim, one of the ways to pull that off is to expel everybody else. That's what the book of Joshua not only tried to do in its own terms, but in obedience to God's command. And of course, the rabbis worked very hard to try to undermine that claim, as I think the book of Joshua does itself. I mean, in whatever group I'm going to say this, I'll be the only one who believes it, I'm sure. But so let's leave that as a hypothesis. Barbara?
So, if the rationalization for the settlers would be the agrarian promise, point of view, that would be then the most exclusive, because two people can't farm the same land.
Yes.
That's an impossibility to share, is the agrarian view. And is that what the settlers, you think?
No, I don't think so, because that is a claim with a lot of problems to it, because in order for that claim to have coherence, you might have to say every part of the land is subject to plowing, and that every part of the land is a land to be cultivated. I live with my neighbor very comfortably, because neither of us is trying to make an exclusivist claim. If it's a matter of land and I've got my land, if I'm living next to somebody and each of us has a lawn, I might say, get off my lawn, it's only mine. But I also acknowledge that very close to me, somebody else has a lawn too. And if I live in an apartment at Shaker Square, life has nothing to do with plowing the land, and I can easily live with others in a business office or in a theater and so on. So I think that the settlers' claim, at least the religious settlers' claim, is God, we have a covenant with God, and we alone have that covenant, and that covenant is focused on this land. Just read your Bible. And the issue of territorial boundaries is problematic in the Bible, and many different claims about boundaries. But let's assume we have some reasonable opinion about boundaries. Anything within that boundary is ours, and it's ours only. I think that's the power of their claim. It runs against other claims that are made by other peoples. And for me, the issue is basically not whose claims are stronger, because once when I was teaching a course on Zionism, I took the blackboard and drew a line down the center and put claims of Israel and claims of others. And you can go right down the list and parallel claims all the way down the line, which to me means this whole discussion about whose land is it is moot. It's undecidable if you're going to be objective about it. The issue is more pragmatic. Do we want to continue to live in this fortress reality where our neighbors can't wait? Now, some of those neighbors have been pacified. I mean, the Middle East is changing its face very quickly. The Sunni Arab states are essentially ready to normalize their relationships with Israel, as the UAE already has. Saudi Arabia is ready to do it. Jordan, for all practical. Egypt, it's changing. Israel, not the whole burden is Israel's, but Israel can make an important contribution to the continued normalization if we could get rid of Netanyahu and be rational. So to me, claims no longer matter, because you can argue history both ways. Ron?
We have, as a starting point for our claim, the Tanakh.
Right.
It is a historical document that goes way back to wherever it goes back to. It can be considered a seminal document regarding our current claims.
Right.
Does anyone else have a seminal point that they can point to and say, look, we too have an origin story for our ownership of this land?
Right. So I'm seeing here, staring at me, restate the question. And so far I haven't done it. So Ron's question is, for those live streaming, we say, or some say, we have an historical document to articulate and to give strength to our ongoing claim. Are there other groups that have parallel documents that supplement their, or augment, or lay foundations for the ground?
Or claim sources, if not documents?
Well, of course there are many claims. One claim is, we've lived on the land from time immemorial. I mean, the Palestinians can make that claim. Look, the Palestinians have never had, they were a backwater area of the Ottoman Empire, and therefore there was no territorial or political integrity to those people alone, okay? But nevertheless, they've lived on the land for a very long time. That's a claim.
As if we.
As if we, right, what you're just asking, are there parallel claims? You've asked two questions. Are there parallel claims, and are there parallel texts that justify or lay the foundations for that claim? I think the Quran can be seen as a parallel text. Now, we can get into quantitative issues. How much of their, look, we have Israel everywhere. So Israel the Bible is filled with it. Our book is not only a book that talks about claims, but it's everywhere. All right, Muslims, how about the Quran? Oh yeah, Muhammad made the night journey through in the Temple Mount. Okay, so that lays the foundation for a religious component to the claim to the Temple Mount. Or if they want to be reasonable about it, to some part of the land. How much of their book? Well, is that relevant? Your point is there a claim? Look, Christianity has a claim too, but in a very different way. The Jewish claim, as it's made, is to the land, not just to particular places. The Muslim claim, in a sense, not that I know enough to say this, but I'll just dare it, is also to the land. The land is important to Islam. And you remember this notion of Dar al-Islam, that the domain of Islam. And one of the foundations of their claim in terms of that is once the land belonged to Muslims, even though history might have other peoples have their claim and justify their claim by taking the land, let's randomly pick an area, Israel. Israel was part of the Muslim empire for centuries. And their view is, once it was ours, even if history makes it somebody else's, that doesn't matter because theoretically, no land that was once Muslim can ever not be Muslim. So our claim to Israel remains. Well, I don't know that that's in the Quran per se, but it's certainly part of the orthodoxy of Islam, as I remember it. So I think the answer to your question is yes. Now, what Christian claims are not to the land itself, but to particular sites, right? The places where Jesus walked, where the key moments of Jesus' life. And these are shrines. And so what Christianity does not look forward to making Israel a Christian area, but to the preservation of the important sites to Christianity for purposes of pilgrimage, right? Constantine's mother, what was her, Helen, created certain areas. The Church of the Sepulchre, I think, was her creation. Way back when Constantine's in the 4th century. That goes back a long way. Christian claims to that site. So the Christians aren't making a claim to the land. They're just making a claim to site. And not that nobody else can go there, but we care about their preservation. It's an interesting, different kind of claim. Okay, so, yes, Ram.
I've been reflecting on your sermon yesterday.
Okay.
Comparing, contrasting, Jacob and Esau's handling of the covenant.
Yes.
And I've been trying to maybe read in between the lines if you're trying to do something there.
Okay.
Even in this conversation of claims to the land and everything.
Yes.
Maybe the core component of the issue today is we just don't trust. One side doesn't trust us, we don't trust the other side. And so it's a question of, do we act as Esau did and just kind of roll over and be like, if you give us this, we'll trust you, basically. You can handle then the responsibility. Or is it more of the line of Jacob, where it's just I need to preserve this, so do I have to do something that doesn't sit well, ultimately?
So what's your point here, that there are two ways of handling a situation like this? One is to cave in and to say, all right, I'm going to trust you to go ahead. And the other is to continue to try to drive our prerogatives home. Jacob is the latter, Esau is the former. In this sense, in this conversation, tell me if you agree with this, the point that might emerge from what you're saying is that Esau is the real hero. That Esau is willing to acknowledge somebody else's claim, whereas Jacob is an exclusivist. It's only mine. Esau as hero. Well, you wonder, would I be willing to accept that? And am I struggling against an unwillingness to accept it, or could I really accept it? I think one of the points the Torah is making is that Esau is the wrong brother for that purpose. So his giving in is not a matter of principle, but a matter of weakness, a matter of vacillation. What's more important to Esau, a bowl of soup or being a key person in the sustaining of the covenant? Is his basic, is he devoted basically to his stomach or to the course of history? And if his answer is his stomach, he has disqualified himself. So his concession may not be, I think you're making a claim of principle, that Esau's principled in his surrender. He's willing to give somebody else a role. But I'm wondering if you could make that claim, if that is, Esau's a different kind of person, and therefore his concession is a different kind of thing. But I really like the idea that, I mean, after all, Jacob is a person who clings to his prerogatives. By the way, he pays mightily for it. He loses children, he's alienated from his son, and when he's finally introduced to Pharaoh at the end of the story, and Pharaoh says, "How's it going?" Jacob says, "Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life." So the issue of measure for measure would seem to suggest that Jacob realizes at the end of his life that he has done wrong and that he has paid for it. When he says few and evil, I don't think he's merely describing. I think he's also making an ethical claim that And that's the dilemma I was trying to talk about last night, because in moral terms, Jacob is really a cad. But in pragmatic, or in the language I used last night, situational terms, a rigid adhesion to moral virtues can be the wrong approach. Sometimes we have to take measures that in ordinary circumstances seems wrong, but there is so much at stake that we have to, in a way, violate the canons of the conventional morality. This is what Jacob did, and it turns out to have been the right decision in terms of the future. If Esau had been in charge of the covenant, we wouldn't be here. So I think it's just I used it as an example of the moral complexity of circumstances, which certainly many of the protesters on the campuses don't have a clue about moral complexity, not all of them. But in a way, those who have a strong principle to articulate, you want them to be single-minded in some way, to drive it home. So the protesters, the logic of protest, I think, has to be in a certain way absolutist. Because only if you strive for the highest thing, you're not going to even get something a little bit more compromising. Should we get back to doesn't look like we will. Yeah, Vivian.
The questions right now just strike me as a patchwork of what we have in our studies. We have Genesis and the characters where stories are instructional, and then I'm not sure that the Torah is a historical document. That to me doesn't. I would think that written in exile, written in different points of history, it is not meant. It is a history and is a story that fits the history in very important ways that open up our discussion. There's always these ambiguities. I'm always interested in the spaces between the in between the lines, or in between the stories, and I guess that always fascinates me in our discussions. Ambiguity is what brings us to discussion, or contradictions, or conflict.
Right. And where do you find that ambiguity? In the stories?
Well,
or in multiple stories?
In multiple stories, not in, no.
Well, that's clear.
Like a
I mean,
yeah.
certainly, there's ambiguity because there are lots of different claims. That's ambiguous enough in the sense of, what is the right thing to do? Well,
Right.
how are we going to assess different claims? The Muslims say, Temple on the Mount, is that a big claim? Is it a little claim? How do you decide? How do you decide that? It's a claim. And by the way, there's the events of history and there's the reconstruction of the events of history, which we call the writing of history. And the writing of history takes place on a battlefield. What is the way to describe the events of history? And the events of history are recorded. They're lost to history unless somebody records them. And a recorder always has kind of a point of view. So the question is, just take novels which steadfastly don't try to tell us this is what really happened. This is an as if. This is how a life is plausibly led the way I'm telling you. And some novels have more claim to eternal relevance because the story about the human condition they tell has greater strength for more people than somebody else's, right? Middlemarch, for example. And that's part of history too, the battle between views of history. Do economics drive history? Fareed Zakaria's new book makes that claim, that revolutions really emerge from economic realities, sort of a modern Marxist history. Or is it geography? I mean, the history of Israel can be seen as situated in a geographically very complex area. The land of Israel is the world bridge between three continents. And by the time Joshua got to the land of Israel, Megiddo had come and gone 18 times. If you dig down there and get occupation layers, you have 18 different layers before Joshua gets there, which means settlement goes back into the mists of antiquity. And what does that mean? It was a land route between three different continents and therefore always consequential. And that's why you're going to have a variety of claims to that land, because it's crucial in a variety of ways. Geographically, forget the literary or the theological. It's just who controls that land controls a lot more than that land. You want to follow that up?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Once you insert God into that narrative, then you're off to a totally different plane of
true.
discussion.
Right.
And so once you designate the land as holy, then we talk about relationships.
Yeah, but you can deal with that. You think it's holy, I think it's holy. Let's agree that it's holy to both of us. Have your mosques and we'll have our synagogues, and we're going to try to find a way to live together. In theory, that's possible. But as Stuart points out, if I'm insisting that only my synagogues belong there and your mosques don't belong there, then it's going to be trouble. I mean, the absolutist claim has to be abandoned. Jim.
But again, if we look at historically, until Israel became a sovereign, there were Jews living nicely in every Arab land, country, whatever, because they're not nationalistic, so whatever you want to call it. And they were thriving, particularly under the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
And it was the same theme, same with the Romans. You guys can stay here, just monitor yourselves. As long as you're loyal to our king or whatever we got, you're fine. But in 48, when we became equal, the surrounding area wasn't going to stand for it. As long as we were subservient in some social scale, everything was fine. I don't mean every day was perfect,
Yeah, no, of course,
but we thrived until we became a sovereign.
yes.
And that didn't sit too well, and it still doesn't.
So what do you learn from that?
I learned from that, again, militarily or whatever you want to call it, as long as there's a presence that we're kind of under,
Yes,
we're fine.
yeah, do you want to go back there?
That's not my point.
Well-
My point is, we're doing something different since '48.
That's for sure.
Probably in some reaction to the Holocaust.
Oh, sure.
That the world, and this past week proves it once again, the world doesn't sit too well with that.
Well, it's getting there, though, isn't it? I mean, first of all, I think you're making a good point, but it's a reality that we're not going to go back to because it makes us vulnerable, is the idea. So a state autonomy is something we will not give up ever or easily.
But change, no matter whether you're Jewish or whatever you are, change doesn't sit well with people.
No, but you remember that for decades, the eastern boundary of France and the western boundary of Germany was up for grabs.
Right.
You know, the Franco-Prussian War, and then you had Hitler coming along later and saying, you know, this is our comeuppance. And now that area is peaceful. It was vexed, problematic for generations, and change happened. They found a way to live together, so change is possible.
Yeah, and it's coming. I'm just saying it's not quick and it's not easy.
No, that's true. But after 100 and, the first Zionists went there. I'm not blaming the Zionists, but if you want to point to origins, the first Zionists went there, the Biluim, right, in 1882. So what is that? That's 160 years already. Okay, it's not coming easily, but I think we can see that something is a brew there. I mean, Anthony Blinken is not making 7 trips in 2 weeks just to talk to Netanyahu. I mean, I think he's going around the Arab world trying to put something together and then asking, what's the flashpoint here? What can bring it about? So, yeah, it's true. Ron, did you have a point you wanted to make?
I just wanted to go back to the Torah as being authoritative in terms of antiquity. If you assume that the Jewish Publication Society is worthy of some belief, in its discussion of the history of translation of the Torah,
Yeah.
it begins by saying Bible translation began about 2,200 years ago. So if we're looking for an antiquity point,
Yes.
something existed in a written form to be translated at least 2,200 years
Okay,
ago.
all right.
Which somehow, I think, predates most of the other written claims.
Most of this is the antiquity claim,
Yes.
and that's a claim you're trying out.
Well, I'm merely saying that I think that if the introduction found on page Roman 14 or 15 is to be relied on or is to be paid credence, then historically the Torah long predates other authoritative documents.
Okay. So it's an antiquity claim.
Yes.
Whose goes back further? Yeah. I don't. Yeah. Shakespeare's not the earliest author.
You can't look at the copyright date because that's 1985.
Okay, very good. Early doesn't mean better, does it? It means longer, and there's something to be said about antiquity, but it's,
We base a lot of our claim on antiquity, we base a lot of our claim on the authority of the Torah.
Yeah, it's
That
true.
gave us the land.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I wonder how much, it would be impossible to discover the answer to this question, how much credence is given to the antiquity claim. I think a much stronger claim, just in terms of durability and number of people who adhere to it, is the length of time, irrespective of how far back it goes, that we as a people have defined ourselves in these terms. Now that is a stronger claim, isn't it? Because it's the claim of fidelity. It's the claim of not just something objective like when.
But we can demonstrate that claim
We can demonstrate.
by the antiquity of the document.
Yes, but I think the qualitative difference is fidelity to an idea has much more power than that it happened earlier. So I guess I just want to say that. Yeah. Gosh. So, Candy.
Well, why is that idea important and relevant to us now? And
Which idea? Antiquity? Which idea?
the idea that the land was given to us by God, and
Okay.
that's important
Okay.
and relevant,
Mm.
and is so non-relevant to Native Americans and other Native
Oh, I
people.
see what you're saying. I don't know
How
enough.
can we give credence to it today and know that we 100 years ago or 200 years ago dismissed it when it comes to other peoples and other places?
Doesn't it
Like
depend?
Native Americans who were guardians of the land in a way that white folks never were.
And your point is, why didn't we pay as much attention to that as that? And I think the answer to that question is not why, but that. When people say this is important to us, and we're going to work effortlessly, tirelessly to get that idea to work for us, it doesn't really matter what the theoretical foundations are. It's that people are willing to go to great lengths for that view. And that's happening in that land now. I think your question is a comparative one, isn't it?
Yeah,
Why are
it
some of
is.
these claims adhered to? And I think the answer is, unfairly simplistically, is who and how intensely is making that claim. I don't know what the Native Americans' claim to their lands are. I'm sure it had some theological foundations, but nevertheless they felt that this was their land. I think the Americans were just so brutal, and when they tried to form agencies for the defense of or for the protection of, these agencies became corrupt, and they were eviscerated in terms of their authority and so on. So, manifest destiny. That was the ideology, right? This land is ours. You just happen to be living on our lands. Get out. And if you don't get out, we're sending Custer. He'll make, so it's, my inference is, maybe unfairly again, is they just didn't have the power to continue to make and assert their claims. Whether they abdicated or they just were forced to by overwhelming power. The end of Reconstruction. Reconstruction was working very, very well until 1875. There were thousands of African-American legislators, and it was working great until, wasn't the Hayes-Tilden election, where Hayes to get in there, made concessions. Let's end
But it
constructive
strikes me
destruction.
as being the same kind of dichotomy that exists between Jacob and Esau. Well, we'll just let it go for now, and or I'm bound and determined to get this birthright.
That's probably true, but Esau's interest was in something else. That tells you something about Esau's character, and therefore, is he likely to be the protector of the covenant? As opposed to just, I'm going to let it go. It's more than letting it go. It's a matter of comparative values. I think that's the point the Torah is making. If you're a materialist, that's what the soup is. If you're a materialist, you're just not going to be interested in protecting something that takes courage and daring. You'll settle for a burger and fries, I guess. So, where are we? So this has been such a rich conversation, and I just want to make a comment about it, maybe obvious. This question, which is so richly pursued in the Bible, is an ongoing, burning issue, isn't it? Different claims, different sources, with different intensities, and if they all converge on the world bridge, it's not a matter of some backwater place in Indonesia. How long are people going to fight over that? I mean, maybe forever, I don't know. But the world bridge, something is very consequential at stake. And look at the rich discussion we had over all the different factors at work here. So, an ancient text, this is part of Ron's point, I think, an ancient text that still continues to burn in our hearts and our souls. It's quite an achievement, really. So, next week, Malcolm and Vivian, and back in 2 weeks, and we'll continue looking at biblical and post-biblical views on the land of Israel. Shabbat Shalom.
today.
Okay. So where is Carol?
Did they accept it? No. What's his name?